Well, good evening, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Kathleen Dudley, coming from northeastern New Mexico, and I have the great pleasure to continue this part two with Robert Jardine, a therapist, kinesiologist, and hypnotherapist from the Highlands of Scotland. So, welcome back, Robert, to part two, and I thought maybe we could go a little bit more deeply now this time and talk about some of the diseases to let people understand how the concept of German new medicine works and how you work with them. How does that sound?
That sounds great. Yeah, good.
Okay, and then by all means, please interject whatever direction you want to go as well. Hello there. There's your adorable son.
Give a wave.
Hello. Lovely.
Mm, yeah.
Um, so, I thought that we have so many diseases and the amount of autoimmune disease that has absolutely exploded in the last 10, 20 years has been astronomical. Oh, that's a good truck. I like that one. Um,
Yeah.
and so I thought, let's give the listening audience some information about how they might treat some of these really common and maybe not so common diseases. And perhaps you could talk about prostate cancer in men. There seems to be such a huge increase in prostate cancer.
Mhm. Okay. So, um, are you okay? He's now put a little toy on. It's making a lot of noise. Are you picking that noise
I
up, or
can't hear it.
oh, that's fine. I don't need to worry about
No, not at
that.
all.
Yeah. So autoimmune diseases. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because an autoimmune disease is the very reason that I actually got into and discovered German new medicine back in 2006. Because my sister at that time was struggling with a condition called rheumatoid arthritis, and she had it particularly severely, and she'd had it for about 16 years by then, and we just excuse me, he's put a toy in. It's just making such a noise. Give me 1 second.
No problem.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Robert.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that little interruption there.
No problem.
Um.
They're delightful. They're delightful children, and
Yeah.
they deserve all of our time, no
Yeah.
matter
Oh, yeah.
when.
I totally so. Yeah. So I was trying to help my sister with rheumatoid arthritis, which is inflammation, where the body is, or I used to believe it was attacking itself and causing it caused all her joints to swell up, fluid, inflammation, a lot of pain. Her fingers had started to point to the side, and her toes were becoming deformed. She was in a lot of pain. And with knowing little more than one kind of about 5 page um, uh, interview or discussion that Dr. Hammer had given about his 5 laws, with knowing little more than that, I took it upon myself to try and help my sister. And it amounted to little more than just a conversation that we had, which was needed, which was she was obviously had a huge emotional issue going round her mind, and no one she had never really talked to anyone about it. So anyway, we had a conversation, and during this talk, um, she basically erupted into an emotional and a massive emotional catharsis. I mean, just she was in tears for quite a long time, and very, very distressed about what had happened some 16 years prior to that anyway. So we talked about it, and we discussed how she wasn't in the least bit, wasn't really her fault. She was really being too hard on herself. And I just comforted her best I could, and tried to support her. And after that, conversation, and within very few days, all the inflammation had completely stopped.
Wow.
And at the time she was taking a drug called methotrexate, which she didn't want to take because it's a highly toxic agent. So she stopped it after that conversation, as a matter of fact. And she had to go for monthly blood tests because the doctors were obviously nervous about giving such a toxic drug. So when she went back for the blood tests, her bloods were completely back to normal again.
Wow.
They were looking for markers in the blood which were showing signs of inflammation. So that was my introduction to Dr. Hammer's work. I didn't have to be convinced or persuaded or it to be proven to me because I saw it happen. I was really lucky, I suppose, because I am relatively skeptic or sort of sensibly skeptic. I would put myself at. I'm not a complete believer in everything, but I do give everything a good thinking about. Um, but after I saw my sister make just such a miraculous recovery in her condition, obviously the joints they didn't heal because the tissue had been damaged so badly, but nevertheless the pain went and the inflammation went completely. And not only that, my sister changed in within that one conversation. Really, she got her spark back. She was happy again. She'd lost that big burden. So yeah, autoimmune diseases. Well, in from the understanding of German new medicine, these are really just symptoms or signs that the body's gone into the healing phase. Because Dr. Hammer's basically his second biological law, he discovered five, and the second biological law is called the law of the two phases. Um, and it states something like this that diseases are part of a two-phase process, or every disease is part of a two-phase process, and we enter the second phase when the conflict is resolved, and only when the conflict is resolved. So this is when your inflammatory conditions and your autoimmune conditions start, is at the resolution of the conflict. Now, I suppose a sensible question is, well, why do these conditions drag on for so long? Why can people be autoimmune for tens of years? And the reason there is that it's because the conflict's not been properly resolved. What's happening is that the emotional conflict, the actual life issue, right, is going from conflict active into healing. And while it's in the healing, you've got your inflammation, your inflammatory processes, and then they're going back into conflict active again because the psyche is monitoring the issue from the moment of the trauma, which Dr. Hammer called a DHS. He named it after his son Dirk, so it's called a Dirk Hammer syndrome. So from the moment of that trauma, my psyche or my sister's psyche was tracking that issue. And whenever my sister's psyche was aware of that issue, by through people or by anything that the psyche associated with that issue, the traumatic moment, which could have been, it can be anything for anybody. Like it can be pollen, for example, or soya, or anything that we can sense. And will whenever that is sensed, the conflict is reactivated, and the person goes conflict active again. Then when they step off that we call them tracks. When we step off the track, the body goes into healing, and then the inflammation starts up. So that's the same process with autoimmune diseases. People are constantly seesawing between conflict active and healing, and most of the damage is done in the healing phase of these conditions. So through knowing this, it empowers us to say, right, so that's what's happening. You can then start to track uh, the the inflammation, for example. So you start to keep a diary of it, and you think, right, when's it bad, when's it clear up, and then you then start to correlate that against what's happening in your life, and you start to see the patterns of what's when it goes into inflammation, but it's actually gone into healing. So it's with this extra knowledge of the five biological laws, you can interpret the symptoms to realize, oh, heck, right. So I really flared up on Monday. So what changed on Sunday, the day before? Oh, well, such and such happened. And then you can see that maybe that pattern will repeat a few times, and you can really start to hone down um when you're looking for what might be causing your condition, because that's very often what I'm faced with when I'm helping people, is that they don't really have any idea of what's causing their long running condition. So it's finding these um through understanding the five biological laws, and it enables us to look at what your psyche is doing to your body. And through understanding Dr. Hammer's work, you can realize that your psyche is trying to help you, and what the symptom that you're suffering is just a sign that that's happening. And you correlate that to your life, and all of a sudden you've started to put the jigsaw together. It's like a big jigsaw, right? And
Well, it is, and I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second. I apologize, but what I find so interesting too, is as you're talking about this, is it is the antithesis of allopathic medicine. They treat the symptoms right at the time, like you said. That's when the symptoms occur and where the most damage can happen. If you consider the fact that you're taking toxic medications or chemotherapy or surgery at a time when the body's actually undergoing the healing process, according to Dr. Hammer in German New Medicine. And so we have been so conditioned to think of disease as something we have to battle against, something that we have to eliminate. And so when these symptoms occur, we become afraid of them, and then we take all these toxic medications to try and eradicate right at the time when we need to be looking at, okay, how do I resolve this internal conflict so that the healing can be complete and not continue to ping pong back and forth between these two phases. And it is such a miraculous thing that the body is doing and has the capacity to do, and for us to trust. This is really about trust, that we are these divine beings that have the capacity to weather all these external assaults, every single assault that comes at us. So yes, it takes getting your mind wrapped around the fact that we have a divine capacity within our own body to heal.
Yeah, indeed. So, the body is the most life. I mean, this is what I'm getting speaking above myself here, but this is what I consider life is. It's a gift, and it's it's come from a beautiful place, whatever that place is, and it's been created so perfectly. And the only thing that makes it imperfect is our ignorance as to what it actually is. And I mean, this is maybe going off track a little here, but Dr. Hammer's work actually teaches us how to live individually and together in a society. No, Dr. Hammer's work shows us that the body is capable of teaching us how to live, right? If we're getting outbreaks of something, it's because society has gone off track emotionally. It's gone in the wrong direction, and
Well
it
said.
it it would tell us how to live. We are actually supposed to be family people living in tribes, living in communities where our needs and our rights are at the top of the chain. and our community is next down the chain. And the bigger picture of all this, and shenanigans that's going on through governments now, that should be far below, um, the priorities of us, right? It's a little bit like common law. I don't know if you've heard of common law, but common law puts man and woman first. As God is the create, we stand under whatever's made us, right? And then we should be the center of the power and the influence, right? We shouldn't be like ping pong balls just swept aside by some government that was voted by some system that almost certainly is corrupt, right? It's just we're the world is upside down at the moment, and that's why we are the species that has got the most technology trying to keep us supposedly trying to keep us healthy, and yet I don't see the human race as being the healthiest species on the planet by a long way. Not by a long way. You get a herd of wildebeest, they just get on with it, and they don't catch the flu or get all these epidemics and need vaccines. They just don't, because they live to their code. We're coded, if you like, and animals are well, a good way of putting this is that our animal friends are very much directed by our psyche, because they don't have such a strong conscious mind to interrupt it, to get above itself, to start trying to think its way out of what it doesn't know. Whereas man, it's completely lost. In fact, it doesn't even hardly recognize that we have this. We're so lost in our own ego that our poor bodies are creating all these symptoms, which we could use them as a guide. I mean, it really is. It could be a roadmap to how to live together. Don't you agree?
That's a great concept, and I agree with you 100%. And again, I don't like to put too much emphasis on the fact that we are at fault here. I think the programming, the conditioning,
Hmm.
has been so complete that there are just a
Hmm.
few of us that have escaped it to discover
Hmm.
things like German new
Hmm.
medicine.
Hmm.
And that once we recognize that we truly are empowered men and women, that we can empower ourselves, that our body really is in control if we just step out of its way
Hmm.
and start living more according to nature, and
Hmm.
recognizing all of the healing aspects that nature offers us.
Hmm.
And when you speak about common law, yes, we have rights. And when we get this hierarchy correct, first it's
Hmm.
God, then it's us, then our relationship to our spouse, then to our children, then to the rest of the family, then to our community. And when we keep that very honorable posture, we can live in a very clean, spiritually fulfilling life. But if we are confused, then all havoc breaks loose in every relationship, in relationship to our creator, our relationship to our self, obviously, therefore, to our body. Very, very important for people to have some form of clarity of the truth, because everything that's being done to us today by the unmentionables to confuse that, to twist it, as you've
Hmm.
said.
Hmm.
And this German new medicine gives us those answers. And you know, it's critical for our lives, for our children's lives, for their generations. We
Hmm.
must embrace this for those reasons, which are huge.
Uh, Completely so. And Dr. Hammer's discoveries show us that um, our bodies are blueprinted. They're designed to keep us within tolerances of how to behave and how we should arrange our lives. Um, so it's such a wonderful gift. I'm sure I do hope, and my fingers are crossed as well, I do hope that eventually the the truth and Dr. Hammer's 5 laws, his work will be recognized, and for the many levels in which it's so important, not just our health, not just overcoming if you happen to have breast cancer and you can overcome, and that's hugely important. But I mean, I think Dr. Hammer said that we learn we learn on 2 levels. Disease, or so-called disease, teaches on 2 levels. It firstly, it tells us what's caused the symptom, and what to do about it. And then there's almost like a spiritual learning where you learn from that. You realize, gee, if I've got to be emotionally responsible here, and likewise, the way I'm behaving may well be affecting other people's well-being too. You suddenly start to be able to be responsible, by just your psyche giving you feedback via symptoms. It teaches us how to live.
Yes, very, very critical. And when we really, when we are responsible and in control of ourselves, our emotions, how we respond to anyone in our life, we grow up. And when
Hmm.
we grow up, we have the potential
Hmm.
to truly change our lives and everyone around us. And isn't that
Hmm.
what's going on today? We're being
Hmm.
given this opportunity to truly
Hmm.
take a look at how we've been living and how do we want to continue our lives and impact others in our life. It's as if this external narrative that's been foisted upon us for the last 4+ years, in the concentration that it has given us this opportunity, a pathway, a bifurcation from what is intended for humanity, and this opportunity to take another path, another
Hmm.
direction. And Dr. Hammer obviously was well aware of all of that, or he could not have used his creative being to decipher and understand what was before him in his
Hmm.
discovery with German new medicine. So he was really leading us to where we are today, because
Hmm.
to be independent and to be able to be our own doctors,
Hmm.
it gives us a freedom, not only, as you mentioned earlier, financially, but it gives us a freedom from the pain, the suffering, the toxicity, the harms, and it opens us to, again, our ancestral connections, which is so important. It's been so erased from us, and it's important that we reconnect. And we can create those communities that you're talking about, those
Hmm.
villages, those tribes, however it is that we have evolved from so long ago. Um,
Hmm.
your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree completely. Uh, um, so it is, if you like, a crossroads, but then it's a crossroads that moves with us. It's not as if we're going to miss the chance. At any time, um, uh, any individually, when you discover German new medicine, you do have to you do have to sort of, after a little while of validating it, you do have to go one of the 2 directions. Everyone that obviously understands German medicine goes to the understanding of the 5 biological laws, and through that, you start to get a perspective on everything else. It's where did I read this? I can't remember. Someone on the internet, Romley Stewart, I think it was. He says you can't see the lie unless you see the truth, right? You need to see at least one truth, because we are swamped by a sea of um, accepted truths which aren't true. but they're so commonly accepted that they become social truths. But you know, on examination, they're not true. But we don't, they're all there's the things like on the legal, lawful side, and governments being corporations as opposed to things that are supposed to serve us men and women, right? The governments are supposed to be doing what the bidding for us, whereas they've usurped us and turned us into citizens, and therefore they can do. Of course, then all of a sudden, if you can control that government, then you've got control over everyone. And if you turn the government into a corporation, then you're making a lot of money off everyone's back. Well, it's you know uh, understanding a truth, which German new medicine is, and everyone can prove it. So from that one truth, it's like suddenly you get a datum to tie yourself to, and you say, right, well, this is true. So what's that guy saying? Oh, that's not right. So either he doesn't know the truth, or he's got some other. You got to make your own decision then whether that guy is genuinely telling you what he thinks is true, or if there's some nefarious agenda lying behind what that person's doing. And obviously, because Dr. Hammer wasn't a man that told lies, and he said that his discoveries were completely accepted and embraced by certain members of our society, right, who've run with it and who are using it for themselves and also using it in a sort of in a back to front way against the people who don't know about it, right? So it then becomes through knowing German medicine, when you look at the larger scale, here he comes, the larger scale things that's going on in society, you're able to see, well, do you know what? There's darker stuff happening. It's not all just a genuine mistake that every government on the planet uh, believes that viruses exist, when in reality there is not one single piece of conclusive proof that they do exist. But Dr. Hammer's research proves that the other way around, in that every disease that is supposedly caused by these virus entities is indeed photographable in the brain and traceable to a life shock. So you don't need to prove whether viruses exist or not, because the diseases that we think they cause actually are photographed and caused by a shock. So, you know, uh, we've got to, you know, this truth allows us to know what's to see the way through the confusion. It's all smoke and mirrors. Well, when you've got something that's absolutely true, you can suddenly start to judge people and become independent of that, um, circus that's happening. If you know what I mean.
Well, I do. And I this second part has turned into more of a philosophical discussion, so I'd
Mm.
like to do a part 3 if you're up for that.
Yes, I certainly would. Yes, I realize
Okay.
that we've gone down that rabbit hole for a
No,
wee bit,
no,
but
it's
now we're
it's
back
it's
up now on the grass.
no, it's very good. And we have 10 minutes left in this in part 2. But what I did want to say about that too was I came to German New Medicine just very recently with your
Mm.
colleague, Dr. Chris Lowther, whom I did a
Hmm.
series of interviews with, who's in I want to say Virginia and in the United States. But prior to that, I had my own experience with healing from what was considered an aggressive cancerous growth that was going to require chemotherapy and numerous surgical interventions. And I, as a holistic practitioner myself, I'm a reflexologist and studied homeopathy and use herbs. Um, and this was in 2017. I did my own research. And what I'd like to suggest to everyone is, because we get so much declaration of truth, and then after a while, we begin to wonder, what is truth? And yes, I mean, I'm on the same page as you are, Robert. I know that German New Medicine is truth. At that moment in time, I didn't know about German New Medicine, and all I knew was I had to find a solution. And I like to I call it getting to my bedrock. And I got to a
Hmm.
point of knowing fundamentally through my research. Dr. Leonard Caldwell introduced me to the concept of, 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 um, of the crisis and the conflict, and that must be healed. And when I got to that bit of information as I was researching, I went, aha, I've hit bedrock. And
Hmm.
from that moment onward, I just kept building my healing process. And in 2 pages, Dr. Sue Armstrong, who's in the UK, she's a homeopath, both human and animal. She had written a book on cancer for animals, and she had these 2 sentences in her book, in the foreword, about conflict. And I took those 2 sentences and I kind of created my own
Hmm.
concept of how to write in 2 sentences what my internal conflict was. And
Mm.
as soon as I wrote those, the healing happened. And you
Hmm.
could see it from day to day, from week to week, until it was almost like a miracle. It was a miracle. The
Hmm.
body was healing itself. And then it was just, as I say, a few years ago that I discovered German new medicine, and I went, aha, I get it.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it's so we have to find out first how to be discerning. How do we discern truth from fiction, truth from lies? How do we hit our own bedrock in order?
Hmm.
And that to me is such an important place for every man and woman in order to heal. Because if we just accept what someone else has said without
Hmm.
our own personal experience, I don't believe it has the same depth of
Hmm.
impact. What do you think about that?
Um, well, I'm not sure about some of it because s- I've worked with people that the more actually, do you know what? The more I work with German new medicine and my other therapies, but my other therapies basically I use them to help the German new medicine process the best I can, right? Um, but sometimes you can create a healing. Like very often, it's not really appropriate to explain a complete understanding of the process to a client in order for them
Hmm.
to heal, right? In fact, sometimes explaining of the process to somebody who's not living within not living within the understanding of the 5 laws, explaining it to them can actually cause a trauma,
Hmm.
right? Because
Okay.
um if somebody starts to sweat after you do something, you don't really want to, if they don't understand what's going on, you don't want to tell them that they must have had an adenocarcinoma or an adenoid carcinoma and it's gone into resolution, because then all of a sudden their jaw drops and they go, my God, what? And they go run off to the doctor. And that might not be in their best interests, right? So healing happens when we resolve the conflict. And if by knowledge or good fortune, we see the process through properly. Obviously, if you understand Dr. Hammer's work, it's by knowledge. You understand, you know what's going to come. You're expecting the healing symptoms, and you don't regard those as something wrong. You regard those as something to look forward to. And when they come, you can say, right, so now I've started to sweat. Excellent. Right. God, I'm going to have to be, and you suddenly realize that you feel secure and supported by a system that you can guarantee is correct, that the biology will follow these laws, so you can rest assured. But as I said, sometimes if a person isn't in that headspace, they come to you and they say, "Oh, I've heard that you can help me overcome such and such." Then you've got to sort of go with care, because, as Dr. Hammer said, you have to dance around the patient, right? It's
Uh-huh.
that patient, it's their perspective that you got to keep within the tolerances and the parameters and the the perspectives of that patient to get them to the healing. And then once they're all well and good, you can say, hey, would you fancy learning this? Then they can, all the pennies can drop after the dangers pass, if you know what I mean.
Yes,
Does
yes.
that make sense? I'm not sure if I got that across well, but
I think you did.
did my
And I
best.
guess it just goes to speak to the individuality of each man, each woman, each child, and the beauty of that, and the skill of the practitioner like yourself for recognizing that and not using a
Hmm.
bulldozer when you need to use
Hmm.
a toothpick,
Hmm.
to move the soil
Exactly.
away
Yeah.
in order to help that healing process happen. So,
Hmm.
yes, we and the beauty of it too, I have understood, and from what you've said, the healing can happen even though we don't intentionally set out
Hmm.
to write our two sentences of what the
Hmm.
conflict is. And that's
Hmm.
that's the that's the miraculous aspect of our
Hmm.
body being able to heal.
Well, most diseases, I don't know exact number, but I should imagine probably 70% of all diseases that doctors treat are actually created during the healing phase of the two-phase program. So they're actually symptoms of healing that we're trying to heal, which sounds mad, but that's where we're at.
Well, it's the opposite, and we
Uh,
live in a moment of opposites. So
yeah.
this is well understood by those who are willing to embrace that concept of opposites. So,
Mhm.
Robert, let's conclude our part two, and I will
Yeah.
see you back in part three. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I'll see you in a minute.
Thank you.